Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to Battlefield House and to our final battle of our Stoney Creek weekend. To give you a recap of the prior engagements, the American Army, beginning in late May, they had captured Fort George out down the Niagara River and had chased the British all the way back pretty much to where we are now. The British encamping up on the heights, about where Dundurn Castle is today. The Americans making camp here with plans to launch assaults very shortly on the British positions. The American camp positions have been poorly laid out though, so the British took a risk and they launched a night assault of about 800 soldiers, which succeeded in capturing the American commanders, both the generals, and disrupting the American position to enough of a point that the new American command, which had to be decided by a committee the next morning, they made the decision to withdraw, feeling that the British were stronger than they had prior anticipated. So we see the American forces moving out here. We have a variety of different units with the traditional American blue, some gray being worn as well. Gray coats started being worn late in the war. For the simple fact of the matter is, blue dye got expensive. The price had increased 15-fold by 1814, and that was because the Americans had declared war on their blue dye supplier. So you can imagine why. But I should ask, any good hardy Canadians in the crowd? You'll be pleased to know that today we are going to be having a unit on the field that is 100% Canadian raised, Canadian led, fought throughout this region. You shouldn't have clapped because they're fighting for the Americans. The unit that you see on the field wearing green bands in their hats are soldiers of the Canadian Volunteers. The British Army had actually begun to crack down on those they feared might have American sympathies, and this led many Canadians, particularly in the Niagara, to decide to throw their lot in with the Americans. Their three leading officers were also members of the Legislative Assembly. So, you think you got problems in Parliament today? But I will give you some good news. Their commander, Joseph Wilcox, who was also responsible for the burning of his own constituents in Newark, present-day Niagara-on-the-Lake, in 1813, he would meet a proper end. He would be shot and killed during the siege of Fort Erie in 1814, and he got the best ending a Canadian traitor could hope for, and that is a burial in Buffalo. Now, during the American retreat, it is common for you to harass your enemy, and the British employed many troops to do so, light troops. The troops you see entering the field now in the green uniforms are soldiers of the 2nd York Militia. Militia service was part of citizenship. If you were an adult male, you were in the militia. That's the same in the United States. Now, for the most part, these men didn't get uniforms, but those who did, this is an example, one of the Canadian ones. Green uniforms, blue trousers. The militia were primarily used to supplement the regular forces and were trained as light infantry. So you see what they're taking here is an example of skirmish order. Kneeling down, spreading out. This is to harass and harangue your enemy. Just take pot shots at them. Light infantry don't win battles, but they definitely disrupt the enemy. Now with the light infantry, we see on both sides, they're kneeling. I get a lot of people that often ask, well, why did they stand up 200 years ago? And more importantly, why did they stand up in big, long lines? There's actually a very good reason for it, and it's because of the firearms themselves. They're using flintlock, smoothbore muskets. That means that a piece of flint has to strike a piece of steel to create a spark. That spark then lands in a side dish called the pan where there's black powder, igniting said powder, sending a flame through a touch hole, etc., etc. A lot of steps means there's a lot of ways to go wrong. It's exposed to the elements as well, so a gust of wind, rain, snow, humidity, these all will affect the ability for the firearm to actually fire, leading to these weapons in good conditions to have about 20% misfire rate. The other problem is accuracy. There's smooth bore, which means when you pull the trigger, the musket ball, good luck knowing where it's going. At 100 yards, your margin of error is 9 feet in any direction. They did have load, and oftentimes could not fit a bayonet. So riflemen were a lot like, like sniper rifles today. It's not like Call of Duty. What's going to happen is only your elite troops are going to get rifles, small numbers of them. Your average soldier is going to get whatever throws lead downrange the fastest. So the idea of the volley, like you saw the York militia firing off there, was if you have a 20% misfire rate, if it's very inaccurate, mass firepower will counteract that. Firing in the long lines means you're getting enough muskets going off and enough lead going down range, you're going to hit something. This then leads to a last problem, and that is smoke. You can see the smoke that's beginning to gather, and that's with a good breeze. You can imagine on a battle where there's thousands of soldiers and cannons going off, how thick that smoke can get. The infamous fog of war. At Lundy's Lane, there's a story the two armies were less than 15 feet apart and could not see one another. So everybody wants to know why bright red? Well, number one, red was the cheapest dye. But number two, it's bright and distinctive enough to scream out, "Don't shoot me, I'm on your side." Red team, blue team, leaves, halves. Simple enough. But what happens to the guys in green? Well, they get shot at by everybody. For the Battle of Lundy's Lane, one of the Canadian regiments, the Glengarry Light Infantry, was in a green, gray, and black uniform. They would suffer more casualties from the British line than from the American line, simply because they could not be identified. And those gray-coated Americans I mentioned, a brigade of them were being shot at by both sides in 20 minutes at Lundy's Lane because they couldn't identify them. So camouflage is great. It's good for skirmishing, but on open field, as they would say, it's a quick ticket to becoming a landman.
Are they gonna fight?
Now I do apologize, I will not be warning you when the cannon is going off because I have been doing this for 20 years and it no longer bothers me. Now the cannons out on the field are examples of light field artillery, and despite being light guns, they're still extremely deadly. They're lighter guns firing smaller cannonballs, but the British Army did testing on guns such as these, and at a range of 500 yards, they had the capability to cleave through as many as 17 human beings. The solid iron ball would be fired at a low angle so as to skip the ball so you can hit as many men in those tightly packed formations as you can. At close range, you could switch to something called canister or grape shot, magic wheel burlap sack or tin can filled with iron musket balls. You basically turn your cannon into a big shotgun. And when it hit men, they said it sounded like fabric being torn in two. Absolutely gruesome stuff, and it was used quite a bit in sieges to help defend fortifications. Are advancing, you notice the colors are going up with them as well. Flags on the field was extremely common for this time, and they served an important purpose out on the field. Flags were not just about morale, they were about rallying your troops. Should something go wrong, the men would know to go to the colors, defend the colors. Officers would often gather at the colors so you knew where your command was located, and in the thick smoke, the taller flags could often be seen above it, giving you a good location to base yourself off. So the flags were very important. As a result, they were defended with your life. There are some harrowing examples of the lengths that men would go through to defend the colors, including one incident during the fighting in Spain, where the British were fighting the French over there, in which a British ensign was surrounded by French lancers. They demanded he surrender the flag. He refused, and they attacked him. He ended up being stabbed 7 times, slashed multiple times, including having one of his arms cut off and a pretty big gash on his skull, but he still pulled the flag from the staff and held it under his body, and it was not captured. That man survived, and to give you an idea of the bravery, he was only 17 when he did that. Now, as the fife and drum enter the field, you guys were treated to their music earlier. They're very talented at what they're doing. But the fife and drum corps used in both armies were instrumental, pardon the pun, for communication. The fife's high-pitched tone, which you're hearing now, notice how well that cuts above the din of yelling voices and musketry. This allowed it to act almost like a walkie-talkie, the sound carrying over to communicate up and down the line. Drums were used to communicate everything in a camp and in an army, everything from wake up, eat up, clean up, and go to bed. Everything in between as well. And bugles were often used by light troops to communicate up and down the lines. A tradition that comes from the old German Jäger parties, the hunting parties and their horns. You may notice the officers on both sides moving amongst their men, shouting out the orders. You also notice the officers have nicer looking uniforms, and there's a reason for that. Officers had to buy them. An officer was required to purchase everything that they took out into the battlefield, their weapons, uniform, equipment, and in the British Army, you actually bought your rank into the Army. The bought rank, the rank of ensign, cost the modern equivalent of between $40,000 to $60,000 just to get in. Now you could work your way up to the ranks by being a capable young man or a vacancy opening up above you, but you still could buy your way up quite a bit. Throughout the Napoleonic Wars, though, due to the constant fighting, the majority of officers in the British Army rose through merit and through vacancies. As a result, the usual incompetence you might expect did not rear its head that much. In the American Army, it was a little bit different. At the beginning of the war, most officers were either elected into their positions by their men or appointed by a political boss. So say your uncle was governor of Maryland. Congratulations, you're now a general of the United States Army. That was the case of General Winder, one of the 2 American generals captured at the Battle of Stoney Creek. These political appointees pretty much proved themselves almost universally to be not fit for the job. As the war progressed, the U.S. officer corps shifted, becoming a professional force that was led by professional soldiers, men who had learned their trade on the field and had proven themselves. Proof in the pudding is that in 1812, the average age of an American general was 64 years old. By the time you get to 1814, it has dropped to 34 years old. And the American Army's confidence improved. The Army of 1812 was worse than the Army of 1813, and by 1814, the American Army that entered the field was matching and beating famed British regulars out on the field, something not even Napoleon Bonaparte could do. So, really, the American Army we know today, its foundation came out of the reforms of the War of 1812.
The birthday party's out.
Now, I did hear someone shout out, why would they do that? Officers actually usually came from, at least in the British forces, usually the younger son. Your older brother got the inheritance, dad would buy you into the army. The hope was that you could win land, prizes, promotion, and make your own name. There's an excellent example of that, of a 17-year-old. When he started off, he had 2 hobbies, getting drunk and playing the fiddle. By the end of his military career, he was a lord, a duke, a viscount. He had been knighted by His Majesty the King. He had royal titles from 11 different countries, 5 mansions in the States, and a wealth today that would go into the billions of pounds. knew him better as the Duke of Wellington. For American officers, there was a chance of fame and glory as well. It was often political office. You would often use your military experience to cash in for running for office. 4 presidents would come out of the War of 1812. Andrew Jackson being probably the most famous, William Henry Harrison the next, Zachary Taylor III, and Sam Houston the last. He was president of Texas, so it counts. Now, one element of the American withdrawal that is not shown here today is the effect of the Royal Navy. During the American advance, they've been supported by the United States Navy, which held control of Lake Erie, but the tides turned. The United States Navy had found out the British had come up to play, and they had a bigger fleet. The American commander by the name of Chauncey was a very cautious fellow. He retreated back to Sackett's Harbor. So the Americans, as they were retreating, when they got to 40 Mile Creek, they saw sails on the horizon and thought, good, here's our support, until they saw that it was flying British colors and began to bombard them. This caused the Americans to retreat much quicker back to Fort George, where they remained until December of 1813, when they would abandon the fort and burn the surrounding community. Now, of great contribution during this advance was, of course, the Six Nations assisting the British as their allies during the fighting here. At the Battle of Stoney Creek, the Six Nations sat that one out. Now, not for any malicious reason, it was because, well, the British may have been planning to abandon this area. And for Six Nations, they had in living memory what happened the last time that they were left behind by the British, and their homes were destroyed in New York State, and they were forced to flee as refugees into Ontario. So for them, they wanted to defend their homes. But when the Americans were repulsed, they sprung forward and fought alongside their allies, and were excellent allies to have. Many of the American soldiers came from the East Coast, and they had never seen an Iroquois man before. They had just heard the stories, they'd seen the woodcuts of these gigantic monsters that lived in the woods, with glowing red eyes, sharpened claws, big scary fangs. We know that's nonsense. But 200 years ago they didn't. And oftentimes you didn't see the Iroquois, you heard them. Their war cries could be heard across the field, and if you're an American who grew up on those stories, the boogeyman suddenly came to life, and he's coming. It was a powerful psychological effect. And the fact that today you are standing in Canada as an independent nation is because of the Indigenous allies. There is not a single battle for that first, yes, give them applause, they deserve it for that one. Because there's not a battle for the first half of the war that was not won because of the Indigenous allies, or the threat of the Indigenous allies out on the field. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as the reenactment is coming to a conclusion, the reenactors out here, they are historians. We have done a lot of work, a lot of research into putting this together. This is a hobby for many of us, but it's also a passion. We also recognize that the grounds that we fight on are often real battlefields that may still carry the dead under its soil. And it's a tradition amongst the reenacting community that after engagements like this, we participate in a lament for those who fell, and it didn't matter which side they were fighting on, it's a lament for them all. So during the playing of the lament, I ask that you please remove your caps. said they have invested so much time and effort into putting together these impressions. Now it's my time now to do what we lovingly like to call Shanghaiing the, well, recruiting from the crowd, and that is, if you are interested in this, if you think wearing wool in the sun might be fun, it can be, it can. We are looking for recruits all the time. If you've got a good back, the artillery needs someone to help pull the guns. If you are musically inclined, speak to the fife and drums. They travel all over. In fact, in 2015, when they went to Waterloo, it was noted by all the European reenactors that these guys set the standard when it came to musicians out on the field. So if you want to set a standard, there's a group to hang out with. If you like red, we've got red coats. If you like green, we got those too. If you like Americans, we've got those too. They're decent chaps. Feel free to talk around the camps, because the best way to find out about these units and to find out how to join them is by talking to us. As you go through, we're more than happy to talk to you, more than happy to share our information, but I do have one request. We are living in these tents this weekend, so we just ask you don't go peering in there, because let me tell you, there are some memories you don't want to take home with you. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Darryl Learn. It has been my absolute pleasure talking to you today. You have yourself a great day at Stoney Creek.